It has been 10 years ago. I started doing game development quite literally by an accident. It was pretty tough. I had no background information, I barely used technology, and I never even heard about programming before I started, which eventually also resulted in me using Notepad in the beginning. But I made my way through, and that's where this video is for. I want to share my story of my journey and hopefully inspire those who also want to become a game developer or those who are already struggling. My name is Justin. I'm a full-time game developer. I am currently working for GamePoint, who is one of the biggest social and mobile games developers, where I work daily on fun and exciting projects. When I was younger, I didn't really grow up with a lot of technology. It was quite common at the time to have one shared computer for the whole household, and so did we. And for me, being the youngest of having two older brothers, the computer was mostly occupied by my two brothers. But I've always been interested in technology and games. I remember very well when we were being on road trips and I had a little Game Boy and always hoping for the street lanterns to hit the little screen for me in order to catch all the Pokemons I wanted to catch. And just the fun memories of playing with friends who had consoles or who had a computer where we could play together, or a friend who had a spare laptop so we could play RuneScape together. And always when I could, I always tried to get behind the computer or get behind the console to play or experiment with it. But I just didn't have that much luxury at home in the beginning. But besides being really interested in technology and liking to play games, my biggest passion when I was younger was doing gymnastics. I was pretty decent, but progressing quite fast. But unfortunately, now precisely 10 years ago, I broke my knee by an accident. I was in the middle of my growth spurt and was training a lot, which caused my knee to be dislocated. And when they relocated my knee, a bone in my knee broke, which caused me to get in the hospital for 3 days and had to go through a surgery. And eventually even had to relearn how to walk. That was quite a tragic event for me, being just 15 years old and having to go through all this. But in the hospital, I was able to borrow a laptop. And I already really like to play RuneScape, and RuneScape really helped me to go through all of it. Which is also what I really like about games. Or it really immerses you inside this other world where you could be just someone else and forget literally everything what's happening in your real life. But for me, I wasn't really used to use a laptop for that long. So after a few hours of playing, I got bored and I remember I just put my account on fishing. And like many RuneScapers do when they do fishing or woodcutting, they are gonna do something else in the meanwhile. And so did I, and I found my way through private servers. RuneScape private servers. It was on this website called Moperscape, and I remember very well you could just type in an IP which you could find somewhere on the forum where someone was hosting a private server, and there you got in and you could play and chat with other people. And I really enjoyed this. I could finally obtain items which were unobtainable for me in the real game, but I finally could get them in the private server. And you almost got all your levels 99 instantly, which really gave you the feeling of getting these big achievements which were hard to obtain in the real game. And somehow I was chatting with someone on these private servers, and someone told me that I could host my own private server. He gave me the instructions and I instantly got excited and tried it out. And I remember very well being in the hospital, hosting my very first private server, all locally on the laptop I borrowed. And that was the first real eye-opener for me, that I saw that I could change things, and people were explaining a lot on the forums to explain how to remove certain models and how to make new areas and how to change stats. I was just playing around making weak items very strong and making very strong items very weak, and scaling up some very weak monsters to make them very strong, and changing their loot tables by adding unobtainable items, or at least unobtainable in the real game. And just having fun with it, just playing around, trying to add things which I thought was fun to add. And this made my time in the hospital even more durable, and also resulted when I eventually got home from the hospital and my parents noticed that I really enjoyed using the laptop. They managed to borrow another laptop and gave it to me for the meanwhile. And on that laptop I managed to do all the steps again I was doing in the hospital to host a private server again. This was also the first time I lively hosted my private server. I think I had a maximum of 30 players online, and the private server was called Evolinity. I had a lot of fun with this, but me just being me, having no real experience with technology and such, always when I opened the script, it automatically opened in Notepad. So the first year when I was developing this private server, I was doing everything solely in Notepad, which, if I think about it now, I'm quite surprised that I managed to do that for quite a long time. But I wasn't even aware of other IDEs were existent, so I was still able to do all the fun things I had in mind and taught myself on how to make a lot of backups. And that's basically how I managed to run this private server, which was a lot of fun and really the beginning of everything. I broke my knee at the end of 2nd grade of high school, and the 3rd grade was really tough for me. I lost my biggest passion, which was for gymnastics. I had to quit. I was in a long revalidation, which took also almost 3 years. But then my brother, who was just graduating from his high school, he told me that he had 2 classmates who were going to attend game development in a college in Amsterdam. So I got interested. He told me like, yeah, it looks a lot like what you are doing, but then more advanced and making other types of games and making games from scratch and such. So I thought like, oh, that's really interesting, and I really love creating this private server, so I want to widen my possibilities and see if I really can become a game developer. I remember very well my very first trial class at the college, and I was just mesmerized by seeing coding in another IDE. It was in Flash and Flash Develop, and it was all well organized and everything had colors and it seems like everything had purpose, which really made me realize that this is something I really want to do, and I would love to put a lot of hard work and effort in to get this degree in game development. So I eventually graduated from high school and started to attend college to get an associated degree in game development. I attended the Media College in Amsterdam, and I remember very well having a pretty rough start, especially with socializing. I didn't really fit the profile of a programmer, and I didn't really like to play games that much. I was mainly focusing on how to create games and how to learn to program. So I didn't really connect with my classmates. It was mainly because they were always playing games at the lunch breaks and after school, while I was always focused on learning and continuing on my homework while lunch breaks. And I was really interested in learning to program and learning to create games. But it made quite a distance between me and the rest. So eventually we had this first big project. Was in first grade. It was the first time we really had to make a game from scratch together with another department in college, which was the game artist department. We got linked up with a few game artists, and we had to make this first game based on Asteroids, which is an old game from Atari, an old arcade game where you have to dodge and shoot down some asteroids, which is a lot of fun. So together with the team we got to this idea quite fast, which we called Monster Growth, which was a bit of Spore-like, where you start as a little fish and eventually will grow to one big monster eating the whole universe. We made 5 levels, which each level had 3 tiers, 3 smaller enemies, 3 medium enemies and 3 bigger enemies. And every time you ate them all, you went to the next level. And so you started as this very small fish and got on land eating beach animals and eventually eating cars and airplanes, and at the end eating the whole universe. And this game became just a little success. We released this game on Congregate. At that time we had Congregate and Newground Games, which were both platforms to launch Flash games. And I remember after just a few weeks, my game got 1,000 plays, while all the others were having just 50 to 100. And this was the first time for me that I had proven myself to the rest that I really could make a game. And that even though I didn't really was a gamer and didn't really fit the profile of a programmer, I did really like to make games and try to make it as enjoyable as possible. And that really helped me to connect a little bit more with the rest, but still didn't change me being fully dedicated and always being busy with my homework and continuing learning on programming. After this big project from Asteroids, we started to learn Unity. Unity was at the beginning of Unity 4 at the time. I was still very distant from it. I did all the homework for it, but always when I could, I chose to not use Unity just because I really wanted to know how all tools were working before I wanted to use the tools. For example, the rigid body or the vector math. I first wanted to understand it all myself and create it in Flash before I started to dive in Unity, and when something unexpected happened that I didn't know how to solve it. I remember having this big challenge of this small game we had to create, which was based on a Pong game, and I created this fish, a puffer fish, which you had to keep inside a circle, and every time it will bounce if it hits the circle. And there were a few holes in it. But the circle was made full of bubbles, and I made each bubble a collision and calculated the redirection from the hit, from the collision detection, myself from each little bubble, which made it sometimes act really strange. It was the first time I really challenged myself to create something with my own tools and try to make it a bit flexible, which was a lot of fun and made my step eventually to Unity much easier, because I had much more understanding of how the things work instead of just expecting it to work. Eventually in the second grade we had the biggest project, which I had to use in Unity. We had to make a mobile game which was based on a myth. I got teamed up with artists again and also even with marketing team. And our team got the myth of Hernán Cortés, who was a Spanish conquistador who caused the fall of the Aztec Empire, which is a pretty interesting story. I immediately got excited and got this vision in mind of creating a full-fledged RPG game, which of course at the end was a way too big of an idea to create in just 2 months for this school project. But it was really educational. I eventually managed to create quite a lot. Created around 11 levels with a lot of puzzles and even with combat and a looting system. And the looting system was also used for the puzzle. So you had to collect certain items to open certain areas and having potions to heal or gain some more stamina. Eventually we didn't win because we didn't get enough votes. It was mainly because the idea was just too big and too hard to sell because of that. But we at least had the credits of putting the most and hardest work in, which was what I was really proud of. After this pretty big game based on the myth, we had a few other projects in college, and one of them which also really stood out to me was a little game we had to make, and we had to use an innovative device we could borrow from the school. I chose to use a device which is called the neurosky. This device is being used to read your brainwaves, and with that information it can track your level of focus, for example. And this level of focus we used to create a little but fun game where you are a sort of samurai in the middle of a bridge with a huge moon, and when your focus is really high, the whole game field is lit up. But when you get a little bit less focus because too much enemies are coming, the game field starts to darken in and it becomes much harder. The school really liked this game, and it also got chosen to put on display on a conference, which was a conference with a lot of other projects from a lot of other degrees. It was really fun to be part of that and having my game being playable in the public for all sorts of random people. After all these projects at college in the third grade, we had to focus on getting an internship, and I was really terrified of getting my first internship. I was afraid I didn't really fit the profile of a programmer, because that was what I heard a lot. But it went quite well actually. My first internship was at GamePoint. I got hired as a prototype developer. I was working on a lot of fun projects and a lot of things they wanted to try out. I was finally that intern who could make all these projects. It was a bit of research and development. And the biggest education I had from GamePoint was communication. GamePoint is an international company, also with 2 offices, one here in the Netherlands and one in Ukraine, Kiev. So one language barrier was already talking with Russian native speaking, but also in the office there were also Spanish native speaking people and French native speaking people and German, and from all over the world basically. So it really taught me on how to explain well in English, talk on a technical level and on a high level, which I still really value today that I was able to learn that on a young age. After my internship at GamePoint, I got offered to stay for my second internship, but I really wanted to have a variety in my internship, so I rejected that offer. And my second internship I got at the Dutch Aerospace Center. It's a huge laboratorium where they work on all sorts of things for aircrafts and everything which has to do with aerospace. And I was in the AR and VR team, mainly working with AR HoloLens, working together with KLM, creating a serious game which was educational for maintenance engineers for aircrafts. I was mostly working on graphics programming, creating shaders to amplify this holographic experience, so people could put on the HoloLens and see the aircraft and see how an engine was working, or see how the whole airflow was for the cooling system, and all sorts of stuff. It was a lot of fun and really educational. It was something which was totally new, especially the HoloLens. It was really in the beginning of it, and a lot of tools weren't supported yet, so we had to create them ourselves and create some networking tools. It was a lot of fun. Eventually, after my internships, I had to go back to school, to college, to do my graduation project. I remember very well, to warm up a little bit for the graduation project, I did a game jam together with a classmate from Game Art. And this was the most fun game jam I had so far. It was the Ludum Dare game jam, Ludum Dare 38. And the theme was A Tiny World. So we created this game, we called it Race Against the Ferrum Gigantes, which was Latin for giant robots. Race against the giant robots. And I had a car at the time, which was a Volkswagen Golf Cabrio in blue. So we got to this idea to create a little world with big robots, and you have to drive on this car, which is this Volkswagen Golf, of course, and you had to survive as long as you could. But all these robots walking around trying to smash you down. And this game was quite fun. Got a lot of feedback from people, and people really enjoyed playing it, and also showed it in college again. They just put up some computers all over in college, and they put on the whole game dev department. They put this game on display. So it was a lot of fun to see a lot of people playing this game while waiting through classes or after school, trying to beat each other's high score. It was a lot of fun and a great warm up to get started for this graduation project. Eventually the graduation project went also really well. It was mainly about documentation, but the project we had to create a game, an HTML5 game targeted to men or to male 40 plus. We got this kind of fun idea to create a game which we called Honey, Where's My Phone? You have to search for your wife's phone inside her purse, which was full of random stuff, and every time when you hit something, your hand goes back up, and you have to collect as many stuff as you can. The items you collect have a certain point, and some items deduct points, and with this point you can upgrade your hand. And with this game I eventually graduated. After graduation I was thinking about what would be my next step. I was thinking about GamePoint, and I really enjoyed my time as an intern. So I texted my old manager. I told him that I just graduated and I was asking if they had an open position for a game developer, and his first reaction was just to come by to the office the next day, and so I did. And the first thing they said was that I could start next week. So I was there on a Friday, and the next Tuesday I started, and the rest is history. I'm now working for 4 years for GamePoint. I have been in this fortunate position to have been an intern before, so I didn't have to go through the whole application process. While my internship I've proven myself enough to immediately get in, and within those 4 years, in the beginning I continued with a little prototype we were making, which eventually got into production and is now also live in our biggest game, GamePoint Bingo. The idea was to make some mini games to make the time between the bingo rounds a bit more enjoyable. Otherwise you had to idle for a minute or so. But now you can just open the mini games tab, which is a casino button, and you have 5 casino games. 1 is Keno, 1 is Video Poker, 1 is High-Low, 1 is Money Wheel, or also known as Big Six, and 1 is a quite common casino game, which is Blackjack. After these mini games we got the task to work this out even further, and we combined the mini games together with our slot games, which were on Flash, and created it all together in one mobile application, which got called GamePoint Casino. This was the most educational for me period. I got responsible on working on creating systems to create flexible slot machines and porting it all from web to mobile, which is really challenging because on web there are a lot of different approaches than on mobile, and it was from Flash to Unity, so to a whole different technology, a lot of new possibilities and opportunities to make it work even better. So that was a lot of fun and really made me used to our legacy code, and which eventually also resulted in me being the main responsible for porting Card Party game. Card Party is a skip bow game where we also have a team mode, which really makes it stand out from the others. And this was also really challenging for me, creating a game again fully from scratch, a game which was fully designed for web and now all had to fit into a mobile design, in a portrait mobile design. So it had a lot of new challenges and things had to be thought through all over again from scratch, working together with designers, game designers and artists. And this game already got a few 100,000 downloads on the Play and App Store together, which is a pretty big accomplishment for me, especially while I was the main responsible for it to port from web to mobile. Because this porting was a success, I also had to port another game, which is War Tornado, which is a Scrabble game. Also a lot of fun. Again, the same challenges, creating a whole new design for mobile and making it all work. Because of these games, our team grew even more. We got more developers, and where I could work in new developers with porting 2 other games, which are Klavias and Hearts. They're both pretty fun card games. Klavias is a typical Dutch card games, but maybe you know it as Beloit of Spades is also quite similar, and Hearts is a quite common game. And currently working, and we are on the edge of releasing it, so I hope I can share about it more soon on my Instagram, but we are really working hard now on releasing another new game. So this has been my story and my 10-year journey so far. I really hope it gave you some insights that you don't really need to have a technical background in order to become a game developer, and that not everyone needs to be a real gamer to become a game developer. It's not a bad thing though. A lot of game developers are typical gamers. That brings a lot of value as well inside the teams, but it isn't necessary. I believe if you've been dedicated, grow your passion and put diligent work in, everyone will make it and will create great teams and fun games in the future. If you didn't know, I also have a personal Instagram page where I frequently share insights, my experience and tips and tricks for game development. If you're really interested in that, I hope you're considering giving me a follow there. So this was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that, and hope to see you back in the next video, where I will maybe share some more insight or experience. This is for me the starting of YouTube, where I really want to create more insights video and experience, but also a lot of tutorials to get you started and create new innovative things. So I really hope to see you next time. Goodbye.